Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. Remember to subscribe to our free podcast so you won't miss any of our illuminating content. Here is episode 203.
We have to, at some point, get to the place where we're digging deep for the answers of who we are and who God is and how do we meet him and how does he relate in our lives intimately.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Lea Ann Garifias. Lea Ann Garifias, the author of the surprise hit Rocking Ordinary and Homeschool Made Easy. Then just this week, she published a new book, Homeschooling High School Made Easy. She's a homeschool graduate and a homeschooling mother of 4. She has worked for the past 5 years as a homeschool columnist, feature writer, and editor of several homeschool publications around the country. Lea Ann was herself homeschooled from 7th grade through high school graduation. Besides homeschool mom, Lea Ann also wears the title soccer mom, professional violinist, and wife to a hot Latino. She's madly in love with her husband of over 2 decades, David Garfias from Peru, and they live with their 4 hilarious children in the Dallas area. Welcome, Lea Ann.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Rebecca.
Again, right?
Yes, it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, Lea Ann is just a saint. We had a recording thing. I spent an hour and a half with her. We had a recording problem, and she was so gracious to come back on with us and try this again. So we're hoping everything's working well and that we can get this recorded and out to our wonderful audience. But yeah. Before we learn more about your books and more of what you're doing, let's just tell our audience a little bit more about yourself.
Well, we live here in the Dallas area, and actually we're a family of 8 now. We're in the process of adopting twin 6-year-olds from foster care. So they're with us. They're just waiting for their last name to be changed in a couple of months, and we're really excited about the new addition to our family. We're really busy with soccer games and playing at church. My daughter and I play music at church, and we're both in orchestras, and my children are in children's choir. We're always busy every single night of the week. We're going somewhere else. So we're not those homeschool families who never leave the house, because there really isn't such a thing. But we're busy just like everybody else, but having a whole lot of fun.
That's great. She's, talking about her adoption too, of what's going on. She's had to put her 2 of the foster kids back into public school, and it's an eye-opening experience, right? I've been following her on Facebook, and the stuff that she's learning is, especially where you were a homeschool graduate, I guess it's just kind of a new thing. So
it really is. I went to private school when I was in elementary, and then I was homeschooled starting in 7th grade, but I was never in the public school. So this has been a culture shock. The kids have to stay in public school until the adoption is finalized. So it's going to be a few months, maybe until the end of the school year. So I've been navigating. I knew it was going to be a new experience. So I started posting interesting things I was learning on Facebook, because I have a lot of friends who are homeschool parents, and I have a lot of friends who are public school parents. So I thought everybody would get a kick out of the new things Lea Ann is learning when she's trying to get people in the public school. Like, I didn't know how to have parent-teacher night before school started. I had to ask my neighbor across the street, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to bring something? How do I know which room to go to? She was all laughing at me. So I really am very ignorant. My first day in car line, I think I wrote about that, and pickup line. I didn't know there was a whole strategy toward getting there at a certain time and maneuvering your car in a certain place. So it took me an hour and a half to get my kids home from school because I'm such a newbie. Anyway, so all these things. And then, of course, I'm learning a little bit about public school philosophy and how that differs, and just the teaching. You know, I have these preconceptions about what you should be doing the first week or the first month of school when you have 6-year-olds. And I've done this 4 times. So I think I know, right? Yeah. I think we all start to get a little bit smug if we're not careful. But I think I know what a first grader should know. And what they're doing in school is so much different than what I would have prioritized. So it's just a big learning curve for me. I have to keep stepping back and saying, okay, she's the teacher, I'm the mom. I just want my kids to be happy learning. But it has been a culture shock for me.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I would suggest becoming friends with Lea Ann and following her, her tips or tricks, or what are you calling it? I can't remember. Your homeschool things.
Yes, things I'm learning about public school.
And they're interesting. Anyway, we talked a little bit in our intro, kind of, that you were homeschooled yourself and you're homeschooling your kids now, but let's dive a little bit more in depth about what that journey that led you to discover what you love to do, and why you're doing what you're doing now.
Well, I didn't want to homeschool when we first started because I'm a homeschool grad. I knew how hard it was and how much it really takes out of the homeschool mom. I saw it really become a huge part of my mom's identity and the direction of every day of every week. And, when I entered adulthood, I thought, I don't want that. I want to do so much more with my life than sit in a basement making lesson plans. So I was a little bit callous, I guess, about that. And my husband talked me into homeschooling our oldest just for 1 year when he was 3. He said, then it doesn't really matter. It's just preschool. And then we can decide when he's 4 or 5 to put him in school if you really hate it. But he was adamant. He's a public school graduate. And he was adamant that we should homeschool. And I just was really against it. So we tried it for that 1 year. And it completely changed my perspective on homeschooling, even as a homeschool grad, just to be, sitting with him on the floor when he understood that letters go together to make a word, or, playing matrix learning games with him for math recognition and watching his eyes light up when he recognized a pattern. And it was really exciting to me. It got to be like a drug. I got on this high of watching my child learn. And then it reminded me of how we cherish those memories of our children saying their first word or making their first steps. And it's kind of, even all of society recognizes these are milestones you don't want to miss.
Yeah, your parents are recording them and,
exactly.
They're excited.
Like even women who have to work outside of the home when they have little children, there's agony about, I don't want to miss these first milestones. And I started to have that agony about missing learning milestones in my children's lives. And I didn't want someone else to be there when my child first understood what long division meant, which is kind of weird. I didn't want someone else to have the joy of teaching my children how to read. I wanted to do those things. And I wanted to be the one who sat and discussed the difference between free market capitalism and communism. I wanted to have those moments that would define who they were. So we did end up homeschooling. And my first son now is 19. He's been graduated for 2 years, and it's been a wonderful journey that we haven't regretted at all.
I mean, I love that you put that same analogy. I was just thinking of that when, we're thinking of our kids walking without us there. And we don't realize that there's so many, when we send them off, there's so many different things that we miss during the day that it's such a blessing to be able to be home and see that with them and to go through all those steps of learning. I can relate in so many ways. So what do you feel like were some challenges that you had along the way? I mean, you talked about the challenge of just wanting to even do this, but is there anything else that you feel like, that you struggle with, and then maybe what you learned from that?
Oh, one of the first things I struggled with was the finances of homeschooling. We were living hand to mouth in our early years of our marriage, and I didn't understand how to be really wise with your finances when you're homeschooling. Because I grew up in a generation where homeschooling was first burgeoning in America. So homeschoolers we would buy our materials from the publisher, and you would get everything that you needed to and document everything, because there was such a fear of the government getting involved or taking away children. So I grew up with this mentality that you have to buy everything the publisher says and do everything that it says in order to give your child a good education. So I got out the homeschool catalog and bought everything for the pre-K grade level, even all the wall charts, all the flashcards, everything that they use in classrooms. It was ridiculous. And I made him sit there and copy his phonics blends over and over and over again and just do every little thing that it said to do in the teacher's manual. So it took me a long time to understand I didn't need all this stuff. So to start saving money, that was really hard. That I was spending so much money on all of this stuff. And then we had to eat ramen for a week. So learning how to cut costs, I think, was a big hurdle. And I'm glad that I've learned it now. Now I can educate my children for just all of them for just wow, I think I spent $200 this year and that was it. Wow. Now, granted, I have a lot of material now since I've been doing this for 15 years, but still, it doesn't cost me hardly anything compared to what I used to spend to teach a preschooler. It's really sad. But so there was that. And then the second hurdle kind of goes with it was learning that I didn't have to replicate a classroom. And maybe people used to think that, especially if you were in one of the really scary places to homeschool back in the day. But we really don't. We have a much stronger way of teaching our children one-on-one through our relationship with our child that is nothing at all like classroom instruction, which is much more sterile and group oriented instead of one-on-one tailored to our child. And that gives us a real strength when I learned to focus on just my child and what his strengths were and how to help him learn what he needed to learn next. That really changed my homeschool dramatically.
Did you enjoy homeschool? I mean, did your mom homeschool that way where you had to follow every little thing and, yes, you know, it was just really grueling and all of that?
Yeah, it was one of those things where you finish every single question on every single worksheet on every single page, and they were all saved in these banker's boxes that were then stacked up to the ceiling in our basement. But that was just part of the environment that we homeschooled in. We were in Michigan, which is one of the two toughest states to homeschool in. And you would hear almost every week about homeschoolers who lost their children over it. So there was a real fear about documenting everything and making sure that you went above and beyond in every subject. That was my experience homeschooling. And I guess I didn't understand the difference between now we can be much more free and open. So that changes how we homeschool. It took me a long time to understand that.
Yeah. So let's kind of talk about the paradigm of, you know, how you feel like your paradigm changed starting from, you know, you have 13 years worth of experience. I want to hear, you know, we kind of talked about it, I guess, with having to do every little thing, but every little thing to what you're doing now. How's that changed?
Oh, now it's so much more relaxed. I think once I recognized that it was more about a relationship with my children, not about doing all these tasks and putting all this pressure on them, that really changed my enjoyment of it. First of all, I just really enjoyed learning alongside them instead of it being one of those things where I'm standing above them, driving them to do the work, but instead more like I'm walking alongside them. Literally when we go to a museum or to a cultural event, but even figuratively around the house, just exploring with them and learning alongside them what they're doing in their different subjects. I think that was a big change. Another big shift was how I used materials, even if they use a textbook, for example. We're not really textbook homeschoolers, but they do use some textbooks. So when they open up a textbook, realizing that my children are all going to use that book in a different way, whereas my visual learner, she is going to read every single word on the page and memorize it and carefully study the charts. But I have a boy who is really anti-reading, not because he can't, but that's just not his primary way of learning. So he will mark all over the book. He will look at all of the pictures. He will kind of abuse the book, but he will find the bold print words. He will make projects or even just fold paper or make doodles about what he's reading. And he's a teenager. He's not an 8-year-old, but he's still learning and recognizing that even though he's interacting with the material in what looks to me like a sloppy or a complacent way, when I discuss the concepts with him, he knows what's going on and he definitely learned about the material. So letting my children use their materials, whether it's their science experiments or their textbooks or their workbooks or the videos they're watching, letting them interact with it in the way that they learn best, as long as they're getting to the goal, as long as they're actually learning the material, then not feeling so strict about what the road needs to be that they take there. Well, so for some of them, it means I'm giving them fewer writing assignments. Like one of my sons would rather talk. He would talk forever about what he's learned about in science. He cannot stand writing even a sentence. Now, he has to know how to write. That is a goal. By the time he finishes high school, is he needs to be well written so that he can do well in college. But I don't make him write in every single subject. He has to write in English, and he has to write an essay every week in history. But in science, if he only writes one-word answers, I don't really care, because he knows more about that science text than I ever will. And in literature, if he doesn't write out his answers, but he can explain to me his literary analysis, then I am thrilled, because I know that he's learning. And that's really the important part, that he enjoys learning and that he's able to prove his learning and use it in his real life.
Yeah, I think it's amazing how you have children, their DNA is all the same, but yet every one of them learns a different way. And that really takes that relationship, like you talked about earlier. It takes that relationship that you have with that kid to understand that. And sometimes you still don't get it, so the fact that he can be home and you still, you can use his strengths to help him or to help them in their different ways is such a great thing. I really recommend that as a new mom, to really explore how your child learns best. It took me forever. I have a kid that just talks and talks and talks forever about something, but he has to kind of flesh it out, and then he'll sit down and write. I mean, he's written a novel that I'm just like, where he's this big talker, but he has to flesh out all his ideas before he can feel like he can sit down and write. So it's just interesting how they're all different. And I love how you talk about how they use that one book so differently, really observe that as a parent. I think that's so neat. In your bio, it says surprise hit about rocking ordinary. I want to know why you thought that was a surprise. And let's learn a little bit more. What is this book about?
Yeah, well, it was a surprise because I'm a relatively unknown author with a book in a very large category. There's a lot of books similar to that written for women, that Christian living, they call that genre. And I didn't expect really to make a huge splash, because there's so many well-known celebrities writing in that market. And everybody's going to read Ann Voskim's new book, for example, but nobody knows who Lea Ann Garifias is. And it is a surprise that it's still doing well. Just yesterday, it was in the top 15 for women's Christian living on Amazon. So I was really shocked to find that. It always surprises me how God is using this message. It's about the impact that each of us have as women in our homes, in our churches, and in our communities. And it talks about the discouragement we feel on a day-to-day basis, the little things that drag us down and make us feel like we're insignificant, but that God is actually using in ways that we can't see, in ways we don't recognize. And then I also talk about the more severe hurt that we face in our lives from difficult people or tragic experiences or traumas that we've faced, and that we don't typically like to talk about because they hurt us in ways that make us feel like we can't be used, or that God can't heal us from those things. And I talk about my history of child abuse and how God used that to heal relationships in my family, to heal my own faith in God, and how the Lord can use situations like this to help us to reach out to others and to have an influence and impact on their lives as well.
Wow. And, when we talked about this earlier, before my recording didn't show up, but anyway, I think we really discussed how sometimes when we have these relationships that have been abusive, that sometimes that really affects our faith, and how you use it instead to actually heal versus like turning against God. Does that make sense? I mean, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I think that's one of the biggest challenges when we have those who don't have a belief in God. Often when they face a trial or a tragedy, will then look to God for help. But those of us who are already in the faith or who already have a relationship with God, if we face a severe trauma, that could cause us to question everything, even our relationship with God, and where was he in that, and why didn't he keep that from happening to me? All of those questions about why he didn't protect me, all of those things. So I think that these trials, even though we think about unsaved people or people away from the Lord going through difficult trials and that they need to turn to the Lord, I sometimes think it's even harder. I don't want to say worse, but maybe even worse for those of us who are Christians, because it can so rock our beliefs. So that was one of the reasons that I shared about it in the middle of Rocking Ordinary, because I think that is when our faith is most tested. Like Paul says in the epistles, that the trying of our faith can show forth if it is gold or silver or precious stones. And the same thing in our lives, when we go through these painful or these hot circumstances in our lives, that's when we find out what our relationship with him is really based on. And it's never going to be rosy right away. When I first came out of my family, I ran away and eloped with my husband. That's how I left home, actually. And that first, I know everybody says, but we're 20 years later, we're still happy. So God really used it for good, even though it was a scary situation. But that first year, I really had a hard time with my relationship with God. I would open up the Bible and the verses I read would just seem so hypocritical, or else they would remind me of the condemnation that I had faced for my entire life up to that time. So it was very difficult to wrestle with, where is God right now? And how is God like a father? And how is he unlike a human father? And what does it mean when God says he loves me? What kind of love is that? So wrestling with those questions is really difficult when we come out of trauma. But at the same time, it's the most important work we can do as adults. We have to, at some point, get to the place where we're digging deep for the answers of who we are and who God is, and how do we meet him, and how does he relate in our lives intimately. And sometimes it really takes something painful for us to open our eyes to that and to deal with those questions. So I don't want to say I'm happy about the way I grew up, but I'm grateful that the Lord used that to strengthen my relationship with him. And also that the Lord uses it now to allow me to encourage others and help them on their healing journey, because we all face these painful things, whether we're ready to talk about it or not. And there's always someone next to us that we can encourage and help as a result.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of wonder if that's why you were a hit with this Rocking Ordinary. I think it takes an ordinary person to really be able to identify, for other people to identify, like, oh yeah, this is an unknown author, but she's talking about how she really rocks that, and how, she's able to overcome all of these things as just a, regular ordinary person. Does that?
Yes, that was the conversation that I had with my publisher, actually, before the book came out. It was kind of a conundrum. It's hard to sell a book if nobody knows the author and they don't know why they want to buy the book. But at the other hand, no one can write Rocking Ordinary if they're already a celebrity. So it was kind of a catch-22.
Yeah.
But the Lord used it. I'm really grateful for
awesome.
that. People who read it.
Well, and I kind of wonder, do you want to talk about maybe the success that you saw with that book after you were able to publish it, and the feedback that you heard from other people, and how was it helping them?
Most of the feedback I get is private Facebook messages that people seem to be. So people like to talk to me that way. So if you have any questions, you can always private Facebook message me. But it's really, some of those messages are really sad. People would send me a note that they left their abusive husband after they read Rocking Ordinary, or that they used Rocking Ordinary to heal a broken relationship. Some of the principles and steps that I outlined for reaching out in hurtful relationships, they used to heal a relationship. I remember there was a college friend of mine who sent me a note a month or two after the book was published and said that she had been praying about how to protect her children from her abusive husband. And after she read the book, then she left the house with them. And we had a long conversation about how God uses these things to help us to reach out to others. And she was convicted about taking care of her children and how to best mother them in spite of the pain that they were all going through. So I think the most feedback I got was from women who were in painful situations, even though that wasn't the purpose of the book. The whole purpose of the book was to be a leadership manual for ordinary people. But instead, this part in the middle of the book, when I talk about the difficulties and the pain that we face, that ended up being what resonated the most with people and helped them then to take the tools in the rest of the book and use them to impact the people around them and even to encourage their own hearts.
Before we go on, let's listen to this message. Recently, the Luminous Mind became an affiliate for EduSense, which offers tremendous discounts on educational supplies. I personally use EduSense to purchase our family supplies because of their great prices, responsive shipping times, and best of all, the chance to earn EduBucks, which I use towards future purchases. Who doesn't love a great deal within a deal? To get a 90% savings on your EduSense materials, go to theluminousmind.net and click on the sponsor page to find the affiliate link. Start using EduSense to illuminate your educational experience. Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Lea Ann Garifias, the genuine homeschool mom. It sounds like a wonderful book. And you talked about there's principles in there. Do you want to talk about any of those principles?
At the beginning, I talk about the race that we're running. And I talk about a 5K that I ran, because if you're going to run a 5K, then you have to write a book and tell everybody about it. You can't keep it a secret. So one time I ran a 5K and I decided to write a book about it. And when I ran, there were people of all different abilities. There were a lot of marathon runners in their fancy Nike outfits, and there were some people who were there just to walk it. They just wanted to walk. I don't know why, but they were just going to walk the 3 miles together and have fun. And they wore these crazy hats and got all dressed up in wacky ways. And then there were people like me who were in the middle of the pack, and we were just pretend joggers who were trying to run a 5K so that we could get the medal and say that we did. And to get the t-shirt, because the t-shirt is very important when you run a 5K. So I was doing that, and it was encouraging that for me. I started off and I was at a faster pace than usual, and I was feeling good because I actually passed a few people. And I thought, oh, look at this. I patted myself on the back while I was running. I'm actually doing better than runners. I was really excited about it. And then I saw there was another mom who was in a very fit family. I mean, they go jogging and mountain hiking for fun almost every day. They're nothing at all like our family. So, yeah, and she's really skinny and always looks good with no makeup. She's just one of those women that it's really hard to keep smiling every time I see her because she's so perfect. And she was running ahead of me because she and her husband run marathons, and they're all so perfect, and all their children run. And then after I ran for a couple of blocks, I came upon her, and she was waiting at the top of a hill for her younger son. And I was thinking about how nice she was and what a good mom she was to wait for her boy. And then I got all done with the race finally at the end when I thought I was going to die. I finally made it across the finish line. And my son, who had trained with me, finished several minutes before me. He was waiting at the finish line, and he actually jogged. He ran across the finish line the opposite way so that he could jog the last few steps with me. And then the mom that I had met that waited for her son, she came a couple minutes after me with her son. And that whole thing of watching all of us go across the finish line at different times, my son and then me and then this mom with her son, reminded me of the race of life. Like God tells us in Hebrews 11, the writer reminds us to keep running the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. This verse at the beginning of Hebrews 12 actually comes at the very end of the Hall of Faith in Hebrews 11, when God is listing all of the great men in the Old Testament and how God rewarded their faith. And so you see all these great heroes of the faith listed. And then at the beginning of chapter 12, God tells us to keep following after them. I was thinking about this while I was running the race, because each of us were running the Christian race, or you might say we're running the race of life, but it's a different race for each of us. For the marathon runners, they just see how fast they can do it, and good for them. And then there's people like my son who were running his very first race, who was so thrilled that he could get a good time for his age group. But he wasn't running against me. He was running in his own age group. And then there's me and that other mom. She wasn't racing me. She was jogging with her son to teach him how to be in a race. And so he will enjoy physical activity. And I was just running to try to beat my time and to not be at the end of the pack. So I was really excited that my time was exactly in the middle of all the finishing times from this race. So that made me feel really good that I was exactly mediocre. So I think that was a good reminder to me that the race was different for each one of us. Even though we were all on the same route, we were running completely different 5Ks. And that's the same thing God is telling us in Scripture. We all are living the same life, but it's not exactly identical. Rebecca's race of life is completely different than mine, and ours is completely different than the celebrity with all of her celebrity merchandise and her celebrity lifestyle and her television show. We're not called to that. And sometimes we get so distracted by what's going on in other people's lifestyles, or what God has asked them to do, or what blessings their family might have, or even what trials they have. And we forget that God gave us a specific race. God gave us a specific plan for our lives. And he doesn't want us to compete with each other. He doesn't want us to judge each other based on what's going on in their race, but just to look at our own race and to keep running it patiently. And that's really encouraging. It's not just negative not to compare. I mean, obviously as women, we keep reminding each other, don't compare, don't compare, don't compare, don't look at Pinterest. But instead, what we also need to remember is that there is great joy, God says in Hebrews, in running our race. And that our running our own individual, Rebecca living her own life, Lea Ann, me living my own life, that brings God joy just in how we continue to do it day in and day out. And that's even on the dirty laundry days. That's on the days when the whole family has a cold, which is my day today. That's on the days when the washer breaks and the days when the car breaks down. All of those days, that's our race that we have to run that day. And that's what is bringing us joy and bringing God joy in the end.
Yeah. It reminds me of, recently I posted a thing on Facebook, and it was a blog post that one of my friends had written, and she's a homeschool parent too. And, we're always asked this question of the socialization and how your children are going to succeed, those types of things. And, I put a snarky remark on because I've just moved, and, people are asking me these same questions, and I'm rolling my eyes. And a lady posted, how the internet is with Facebook. Some people just see it. And, she posted this big thing of how this article was really a cut on her as a non-homeschooling parent, that, that she was doing just the right thing. And I felt really bad because normally I don't feel like I'm a better mom because I homeschool, or because I'm a better mom because I get to stay home with my kids and some moms have to work, or most of the time there's a lot of grace for, I can see that. And I think that's really the challenge of where we live, is that we all have a different path that we have to take, even homeschooling moms, the way we have to do it. And I'm hoping to really cut into your Homeschool Made Easy, because some parents are huge on doing elaborate things, and then other parents just can't. It's just the bare minimum of whatever is available to them. And we've really got to be able to feel comfortable in our own space, that we each have our own calling, our own race, and that we don't need to compare. I know God doesn't compare us, he doesn't think that I'm a better mom, because he's just grateful that I'm doing the calling that I was meant to do. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, absolutely. No, you're right.
So let's move into Homeschooled Made Easy. Let's talk about what that's about. I think we may have talked a little bit, the difference between your homeschooling experience versus what you're doing now. But, is that really the crux of the book, Homeschooled Made Easy, and then Homeschooled High School Made Easy?
Yeah. Well, Homeschool Made Easy is a quick and easy tip book, really, about how you can declutter your mind and your homeschooling from the distracting things that are slowing you down, and just simplify the whole process so that you can get back to enjoying homeschool. Because even though you're right, there's a lot of homeschoolers with this big elaborate thing, and some people like that. Some people want to spend 8 or 10 hours a day homeschooling because they love the crafts, they love the process, they love the papers, every part about it they love. But I don't think that's most of us. I think most of us, homeschooling is just a part of our lives. It's not our entire lives. And we have other things that our family needs to do, other ministries that God has called us to do. So we need to be able to simplify it so we get done what we need to get done, and it doesn't impede us from the relationships and from the ministry that God has for our family. So that's what the crux of Homeschool Made Easy is. How do we know what our child needs to know, and how do we get it done as easily as possible? So I talk about learning styles and how, like we talked about with the book, how to be able to, with my children who all use the book differently, how you can observe your children and understand how they learn best. And then I talk about how you can observe yourself and understand how you teach best. What is your own particular bent? If you really are a Charlotte Mason person, if you really are a classical homeschooler, if you are a textbook person, whatever your homeschool style is, to help you find out what that is. And then find where those overlap. That's your sweet spot. If you're right where the child learns best and you're meeting that need in the way that you teach best, that's where homeschooling is going to be easy and simple for you and for the child. So that's the purpose of the book, is to help you find where that sweet spot in the middle is so everybody can enjoy homeschooling again.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of why you didn't even want to homeschool, because of what you saw your mom having to do. You didn't want that to be, you didn't want it to be this obsessive thing that right. was all your life was about. I mean, I know for me, I have laundry, I have dinner, I have, cleaning the house, I have church obligations, I have community obligations, I don't have time to spend a whole full day. I have a podcast, obviously.
Yeah.
And I love every one of those things. I don't want to have just one part of my life just sucked out. And the other thing too, I always feel like, well, this really is it's their thing. Other than me being accountable, holding them accountable, it's not meant for me it's not my thing. You know what I mean? I'm learning in a different way than them. And that's
yes.
really important.
And by the time they're teenagers, I have to keep reminding myself that I can't make them learn. I can give them what they need to learn. I can hold them accountable for finishing their assignments. I can give them tests and grade them. I can't make them actually memorize all of the presidents of the United States. Not by the time they're teens. I can't make them actually study World War I in depth and know all of the battles and why they are significant. They have to do these things themselves if they're going to do them. They have to have some inner motivation. So we can hold them accountable. We can give them Fs, hold them accountable to finish their work. They have consequences in our house if they don't do their job. But to a great extent, it's up to them. So being able to step back, which I think is part of Homeschool High School Made Easy, as I talk a lot about that, understanding where our children are mentally and emotionally in high school and what process they need to go through from 9th grade until graduation in order to be prepared for adult life, and what that looks like. When we're looking at them, that sometimes it looks a little shaky and we don't understand why they're behaving the way they are. But at the same time, I wanted to give mom's perspective on this is what your child needs to do, but this is all you need to do.
Yeah.
The rest of it is really up to them.
Yeah. And I love the compulsory part of the homeschooling actually can become very abusive. I mean, like we talked before. I mean, we want to keep those emotional relationships in a good place, so that they, there's a decent respectable relationship there on top of their, and I think sometimes when there's compulsion, it stops their learning anyway, because we all have that piece inside of us of like, oh, you're going to make me do it? Well, that it's kind of just reminds me of being a little bit more rebellious, where all of a sudden you're rebelling because somebody's making you do it. And so I think that's such a great component of homeschooling is you have to understand your job as a homeschooling mom, not your job isn't to make them learn. Your job is to just provide these certain things. Correct?
Exactly. Just like when we cook them dinner, but by the time they're teens, you can't make them eat it.
Yeah.
So they
and how abusive
they won't.
Yeah, and how abusive would that be if you actually shove the food down their throat? I mean,
right. We would never think of doing that, but we are so tempted to cram literary analysis down their throats, whether they want it or not.
Exactly.
But it's not going to work that way. And those are the two reasons people quit homeschooling later. A lot of people want to homeschool when their children are younger, and then they get into middle school and high school, and they tend to go back, put their children in a traditional school. And that's for two reasons. They usually say it's because the material is too difficult to teach them, or because their children are too difficult to teach. So it's either the subjects or the teens themselves. And so that was a big reason I wrote Homeschool High School Made Easy. It was to show you how easy it is actually to teach high school subjects. It's a lot. I think there's a lot of mystique on how to teach children calculus when you don't realize that you're not teaching them. The material is teaching them, or the co-op teacher is teaching them, or the textbook is teaching them. The child is learning it, but we don't have to know every single little thing in order to provide them with a great education. So I give a lot of tips on how to make sure your child can learn even more than you can. And isn't that the purpose of life? We don't want our children to ever be stunted by the education of their first grade teacher.
Yeah.
Or can only go as far as their high school level, or only know as much as we know, God forbid. We want them to continue learning for the rest of their lives. That's just part of being an adult. So our job as parents of teens is to show them how to continue feeding themselves, to go back and use the dinner metaphor. So we'll demonstrate every night what is a balanced meal. We'll even tell them you're going to make your own lunch yourself, but we're not going to dictate every single part of that process by the time they're that age.
Yeah. And hopefully we realize that our relationship does evolve from the time that they're in preschool, kindergarten age to the time that they're in high school, that it goes from, more involvement then, and just slowly you work your way out of a job. So, and it reminds me of I just had a conversation with Hunter Motz, who's just basically talking about education. And he said that some of the best teachers are teachers who don't know everything. And I thought that was very comforting for a homeschooling parent, because he feels like when you take over the child's education, all of a sudden they aren't driving it. They're not the ones, they have no responsibility. There's no whatever there. But if you don't know, and they are very aware that you don't know how to necessarily do that, but you're there to help guide them through it, they will take charge of it. And that's so good for the kid to do, to really take responsibility for their own education.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
So great. Let's talk about maybe some successes that you've seen with Homeschooled Made Easy and how that's helped other people.
I have gotten a lot of good feedback on that book about how it really helped to simplify the day. So mom said they found more time in their day and went away from having these really difficult schedules or chaotic school days to being able to focus. And I've gotten a lot of feedback too. Several people have told me that it saved them money, because they learned how they can use their existing materials. They don't have to go buy new curriculum every time they realize that their child doesn't understand something, or every time they hit a roadblock. But instead, they can learn how to use their materials, how to tailor their curriculum and their materials to suit their child's learning style and to suit their own teaching style. So if you're a Charlotte Mason mom and you have an algebra textbook, you can still use that textbook as a jumping off point to teaching them the principles and showing them how it works in real life. We don't have to be encumbered by our books, but we're free then to use our tools in the best way that suits us and that suits our students. So that can really save a lot of money. And just by simplifying homeschooling, then it really helps people to continue homeschooling instead of getting discouraged when things get rough or the first year seems super long, to understand that it is going to get easier and easier as we learn how to apply these principles and how to reshape our own homeschool thinking so that we can find the easiest and simplest solutions to our teaching problems and our students' learning issues.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to how we use the textbook. There's a difference between understanding what the lesson objective is and then doing every single point on the page. You know what I mean? Like the whole point of that textbook is they give you several examples of how you can teach that objective, but you're not supposed to necessarily do every objective, or every lesson. You're supposed to just get to the point where they understand the objective of the lesson. You know what I mean? I mean, it's kind of going back to that. That's great. Well, let's talk about maybe long-term goals that you might have and how that's working into the legacy. What are you doing now to work into that legacy?
My long-term goal, one of them is to graduate all my children so I have even more free time. So I'm working into that legacy by teaching them every day so that they will continue moving forward in their education. Let's see. One of the biggest goals my husband and I have is enjoying grandparenthood. We talk about that a lot, almost every day. We talk about the kids when they are adults and where they'll be and dreaming about what they'll be doing. And I'm trying to brainwash them now. I spent several years brainwashing them that they will give me lots of grandchildren. And now my new subliminal message that I drop into almost every conversation is that they will have Sunday dinner with me every week. And they're rolling their eyes now because most of them are teens and think that I'm ridiculous about that. But so we dream a lot about our family relationships in the long term and continuing to knit our family into a loving and caring family that still reaches out to each other, even as the children begin scattering in adulthood and going in different directions. So that's a big priority to us, our family relationships. And then personally, I'm working on a new writing project. I've been shopping a project for a homeschool reference book, actually, that I'm really excited about, to a publisher. And I'm hoping that I'll be working on that over the next year and getting it published soon.
Oh, that's awesome.
Those are the goals we're working toward now.
Well, and I love the word legacy because I feel like, with you and your husband continually talking about what you want those relationships to look like, it helps be a reflection of what you're doing now, so that, so you have those good relationships where your kids want to come over for Sunday dinner. You have to build that relationship there. Does that make sense? Like,
yes,
it's a daily thing that we're working on.
And by talking about it constantly to each other and to our teens, I pray that it will help us to maintain the proper priorities and the proper perspective. In the day in and day out, I can get weighed down by whether or not all the history reading was done and whether or not the rooms were picked up and whether or not somebody was late to soccer practice or all the minutia of our days, how well the laundry was folded, really stupid things like that. But instead, when we're dreaming about our future, it helps to change my mind and helps me remember, wait a minute, that stuff is really going to be stupid in light of eternity. We're working toward these relationships. That's what our goal is. So it really helps me to keep it in perspective. And then, even more importantly, it helps me to enjoy the milestones that get us on it. When we do have our wacky family dinners on Sunday, I'm really in the moment and enjoying them because this is the purpose. This is what I'm working toward, and we're already enjoying it now. Or when we go on family vacations and we're making really crazy memories, our family is hilarious. So when we're laughing together, I think almost any time that we're laughing together, that's when I want to pinch myself and say, we're already having a taste of that legacy now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love those words. Great conversation. Before we say goodbye, do you have any final parting words for our listeners? And then give us your contact information, where we can find your books. And you have a blog. You have a ton of stuff just on your website with a blog too. So, it's definitely stuff we have to check out. Tell us where to find that.
Okay, my blog is at lagarfias.com. It's LAGARFIAS. And you can find me on Facebook. I am the only Lea Ann Garifias in the world, but it's spelled Lea, and then my second name is Ann, and then Garfias. So if you find me, it is actually me. You don't have to worry about that. And I'm on Instagram at the same place, Lea Garfias. So that's me. And my parting words to you, Rebecca, and to all of our friends today would be that you have a greater influence than you can even see. It's not just your podcast. It's not just your blog. It's not just your friends at church. It's not just your family. It's all of that, plus even more that you don't even realize. So tomorrow, when it's hard to get out of bed, or the dishes are piled up in the sink, or the van is out of gas right before you have to run an errand, just remember that every little thing you're doing is impacting others in a huge way, and that God is using you so mightily. So I hope that you enjoy each one of those moments.
Wow, that is great advice. It's definitely what I needed to hear today. So, and we talked about how we both weren't feeling all that great, but I'm so grateful that we were able to reconnect. And I'm hoping that this podcast, records and everything goes smoothly, because I just love your inspiration. I would definitely follow her on Facebook and then check out her writing. She's got some really great things that she comments on, and it's very intelligent. I love it. Again, her website is leagarfias.com. We're going to be sure to link all that information, though, with her Facebook page and Instagram and everything that we've discussed today on our website as well. But thank you so much, Lea Ann, for rejoining us and helping to light our minds on fire in this important topic of education. I appreciate it.
It was great to talk to you, Rebecca. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Lea Ann Garifias, go to our show notes at theluminousmind.net. Be sure to become a subscriber to our free email list. Then check out the Services tab to see how we can continue to assist you, our fire starters. Also, to help us continue production of illuminating content, go to the Sponsor tab at theluminousmind.net for more information on sponsorship and affiliate programs. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Google+, Pinterest, and now Instagram. Get our free audio content by subscribing on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher. To help us grow, consider these easy ways. Tell your friends about us, leave us a review, share our content. Tell us how we can help you so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.